So my first exposure to hockey was actually just kind of getting off the ice after my figure skating practice in the morning. And then we had I think it was an AHL team at the time, the Ice Caps. They don't exist anymore, but they would have their practices after our early morning figure skating sessions. So I would see these guys jump on the ice and they'd be doing their sprints and their push-ups and their coach would be yelling at them. And I just remember thinking that was like way more my speed. I was like, this looks like fun.
This episode of the Smart Athlete Podcast is brought to you by Solpre. If you're active at all, whether you're running or simply out walking for the day, you've probably experienced one of the number one problems that active people have, and that's chafing. Solpre's all-new, all-natural anti-chafe balm solves that problem while feeding your skin the vital nutrients it needs to be healthy. If you'd like to stop chafing once and for all and treat your body right, go to solpri.com to check out the anti-chafe balm today. That's SOLPRI.com. Welcome to the Smart Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Funk. My guest today was a member of the 2018 Korean Olympic hockey team. She has her PhD in human evolutionary biology, and currently she's working at Kayak as a data scientist. Welcome to the show, Randi Griffin.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for spending time with me today, Randi. Before we got going, I was asking you if you've been on a podcast before, and apparently the podcast you were on had much better digs than me, a nice studio. So I appreciate you downgrading a little bit to spend some time with me.
Yeah, no problem. It was a little local thing, so they just bring people in from the Boston area.
So is that where you are? And that's what I was trying to figure out. Are you in Boston now?
Yeah, I'm in Boston. I came here for the work because Kayak is based here.
Okay.
So yeah.
So I want to jump way back to getting started in hockey. How do you get started in hockey? It obviously hockey is kind of growing in popularity in the U.S. I don't know if you grew up in the U.S. or if you grew up in Korea, but how does that journey kind of start for you?
Yeah, so I did grow up in the U.S. My mother grew up in Korea, but I actually hadn't been there until I went there to play hockey as an adult.
Okay.
So I grew up in North Carolina, where hockey is not a huge sport. It's grown a lot lately. But when I was a kid, the Hurricanes actually had just sort of moved. They were previously the Whalers in Connecticut, and then they moved to Raleigh, Greensboro, North Carolina first, and then to Raleigh. So that was happening while I was a kid. And so there was a lot of buzz in the area around, we have like a professional hockey team now. And I actually was a figure skater first. So that was something that my mother was really into. She had always just dreamed of her daughters being figure skaters. For some reason, she wanted figure skaters and pianists. So that's what we did. So my first exposure to hockey was actually just kind of getting off the ice after my figure skating practice in the morning. And then we had I think it was an AHL team at the time, the Ice Caps. They don't exist anymore, but they would have their practices after our early morning figure skating sessions. So I would see these guys jump on the ice and they'd be doing their sprints and their push-ups and their coach would be yelling at them. And I just remember thinking that was like way more my speed. I was like, this looks like fun. I'd really like to be out there. But there was just this really automatic, like I would say, could I try that? And people would say, no, like girls don't play hockey. There's no place for you to play. And so it just wasn't even really a question. And then the big game changer for me was 1998. Women's hockey was in the Olympics for the first time. So that was Nagano, Japan, and Team USA won the gold in that one. And I was 10 years old at the time. So I remember watching that on TV with my parents. And my mom had always said, you should go to the Olympics as a figure skater. And I said, you know what? I want to go to the Olympics, but not as a figure skater. I think I want to do that. And for the first time, my mom couldn't really say, girls don't do this, because obviously they do. On TV, they were doing it. And it still took some time. She was still like, no, this is weird. It looks dangerous. And I think my dad was the one who was really like, he didn't like watching figure skating that much. He certainly didn't like getting up at like 5 a.m. to take me to figure skating practice. So I think he kind of pushed my mom and was like, why don't we just let her try it? He realized he had a lot more fun watching me play hockey than figure skating. So that was how the transition happened around age 11, I guess. And my sister also, she's 2 years younger, but she also made the transition with me. So we became a hockey family.
So was it at that point? Was there? I guess at that age it's girls hockey, but was there a girls hockey team, or was it co-ed, or what was available to you?
Yeah, so at very young ages, it's pretty mixed. And so it wasn't really a big deal at age 11 for me to be out there doing learn to play hockey with the boys.
Hmm.
There actually was a local girls hockey team, but there were so few players that they combined everyone from age basically as old as you could be to play hockey. So there were like 10-year-olds on this team all the way up to age 19.
Hmm.
So there was one team for all the ages. And so you could imagine that was sort of a weird dynamic. And it was really just
Yeah.
kind of for fun. You'd go out and mess around. But when there's a 10-year-old and a 19-year-old on the ice, it's not going to be like super competitive. So I actually ended up growing up playing in the boys hockey system in North Carolina. Um, I guess technically it was co-ed, but there weren't a lot of girls playing. There were just a handful of us. But that's what was available at the time.
And I only have kind of, I guess I'll say, minor exposure to professional hockey through my college roommate who loves it. But obviously, at the professional level, the game can be pretty aggressive. Um, is it, when you're talking amateur sport, is it still that way? Is it more strict in terms of like checking and all those kind of things that happen at the kind of higher professional level?
Yeah, it definitely is. So on the women's side, there's technically no checking. There's still a lot of physical contact, but
Okay.
it really has to be like incidental. As you're going for the puck, you can crash into somebody, but it's not like in men's hockey where there's like a 3-second rule where you can sort of smash into somebody even after they got rid of the puck.
Hmm.
That's not allowed. On the boys' side, they're very strict about fighting, for example. So like that doesn't happen in youth hockey. Everyone's wearing face masks as well, so like it would be kind of stupid to get in a fight anyway. So yeah, it's a different game. I think it's more focused on skill and the fighting kind of, I don't know. I guess junior hockey has fighting. Like even college hockey, there's really no fighting. So yeah, I think that's just a transition as you move into the professional game.
So, in since I had this opportunity, maybe I should ask this question in regards to fighting. This isn't obviously something you've participated in, but just in your opinion, since it doesn't really happen at the youth level, and it transitions as you go to the pros. Is it? Do you think it's more for entertainment value than it is for
Mm.
like jockeying for position?
That's a really good question. I think there is entertainment value for sure, and I think that is a huge factor in maintaining the culture of fighting. But it's definitely also, I think, a cultural component of the game, at least in North America. I think it's much less so in Europe, and certainly in Asia, they don't have this kind of fighting culture.
Hmm.
But US and Canada, I think you'd have a really hard time changing a lot of guys' minds because they've sort of convince themselves that this is an essential part of the game, that hockey is an exceptional sport. And even though things like rugby and football don't have fighting, they'll say, well, hockey, the game moves so fast. We have to police ourselves. If somebody does something wrong, we have to be able to punish that guy. And if we didn't have this system, it would be all just chaos. I don't really buy that, but I know that some people feel that very deeply in their heart. And it's not just about the entertainment value for them. I think it really is like the culture of the game, at least in some circles.
Well, yeah, I just it's like I said, it's really me kind of coming from an outside perspective looking in. As much as this is a Smart Athlete podcast, I almost live in a little bubble, kind of doing my own thing. I don't watch a ton of professional sports. I watch football now, and I've watched soccer for a considerable amount of time. But so I get kind of glimpses into it, but you definitely get that appearance that like if you want a very like aggressive sport, which a lot of Americans do, they love football, then like hockey's right up your alley. You even get fighting. Like if you like football and you like UFC, you're gonna love hockey. So that's where I wonder whether it was people putting on a show because like when you watch American football, guys do end zone dances and they do all these things. It has nothing to do with the game. It's all entertainment value. So that's why, as somebody inside the sport, hoping you could have a better kind of insight into that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It is a complicated issue. It's definitely something I've talked about with a lot of my hockey friends. And, friends of mine are pretty much across the board in terms of thinking like this really needs to go. It's ridiculous and it's just about making money. And then guys that like really feel like, no, this is it's a sacred part of the game,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and you can't touch it. Uh, so yeah.
I can understand that in the sense that like I don't know that I would want to play a sport where I'm getting into fights all the time, but at the same time, like I can see the appeal in the sense that it almost seems like a lot of especially U.S. culture is getting kind of homogenized, where we're one big mass of like beige. Like there's not as many differences and pockets of uniqueness as I think existed pre-internet, as
Mhm.
that kind of spreads and mashes us all together. So maintaining some kind of uniqueness or allure, even if it is through violence in this case, I could see that kind of from a, well, I don't want to say anthropological standpoint, but just that kind of idea.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, no, I mean, I can definitely empathize with it. And there's a pretty good documentary about fighting in hockey that I watched recently on Netflix, actually, and I'm blanking on the name of it. But they sort of, I think, fall on the side of fighting has a role in the game, and like it's not just about entertainment value. And they use this example of Wayne Gretzky, who was like not a big guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if people, big guys on other teams wanted to just like knock his lights out, like they probably could at some point. But Wayne Gretzky was sort of protected by the enforcers that he had on his line with him. And he felt very strongly about it. Like if he got traded, he's like, this guy's got to come with me. Like this is my protector. And this is the guy who allows me to play the very finesse style of game that I play. Right. And people have made the argument that Sidney Crosby, for example, doesn't have that. And part of he's got a lot of concussions and had a little bit of a challenging career in terms of injuries. And he's not even that little, like compared to Gretzky, but
Right.
he's never really had that enforcer presence on his line. So I think there's more of a sense that you could take him out and like maybe you're not going to get punished. So I can see the argument for it. But yeah, I mean, I guess my opinion is it's not an essential part of the game, and I personally am very happy with the fact that the women's game doesn't have it. I don't think it needs it. But I can understand that there is kind of two different versions of the game.
Right.
Yeah.